do you think we have remains of these? Like when they say non-human entities or biologics, do you think we have in our possession?
I definitely think there was a crash retrieval program. What they picked up, whether it was, adversaries or us, our military experimental stuff. One of the recent whistleblowers that came out, Jake Barber, said that he was part of the crash retrieval program, and that 95% of what they picked up was clearly, just either drones or whatever.
Right.
But then they had a few incidents where they picked up something that he said was non-human intelligence. But what I will say is, in my pursuit in trying to get to the bottom of all this, I've yet to have anybody show me anything.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to look. I think that people can have their personal perspective, and if they want to testify, I'm not doubting that anybody's wrong. I'm just saying, you can say that you had that experience and that you saw that, but I didn't, and I'm not going to just believe it.
What would it take, do you think, to prove to you that there is something?
I'll have to see it.
And do you think that's enough? Knowing what we don't, like Annie Jacobson wrote a book about, she had a source at Area 51 who claimed our government basically mutilated autistic children to turn them into what looked like extraterrestrials to scare the Soviets during the Cold War. So it's like when you look at something that looks biological, you don't know if it's been manufactured in a government lab.
That's messed up.
Yeah.
Really messed up.
I've had, I guess, let me start over. You said you'd have to see it to believe it. But the issue is I've seen a lot of things in my life that are unexplainable. A lot. I think I have like 5 stories, especially the recent ones. I wouldn't be able to tell anybody what this was or how this is possible. It seems to defy our conventional understanding of physics.
What would it take for, like, you say you have to see it, would it be have to see it in an uncontrolled or controlled environment? Because if they showed you in a controlled environment, would you have doubt in your mind as they manufactured this, whether it's reverse engineered or not, they manufactured this. For you, would it be, I have to see it, uncontrolled environment, I'm driving down the highway, it lands in front of me,
No, I mean, honestly, I would be open to whatever, just at the end of the day, you know what you know and you see what you see. And if I get my hands on something that is clearly that's created by non-human intelligence,
it's not possible. It's not, You
don't think it's ever going to be possible? You don't, because
it's not possible for you to see something and then be like, oh, that's alien made. Because let's say right now, when we hear these stories, let's use drones as a really good example. The technology is ridiculously rudimentary. We had the technology to make quad rotors, 40 years ago, but nobody did. And it's a question of why. Eventually someone figured out, hey, we can use these little microcontrollers to make a quadcopter, right? Now, what would happen if if right now, and people have already done this, you make a saucer shape and you put the quad rotors in it and it'll float around and you can make it spin as it floats around. And people will be like, it's a flying saucer. And it's like, it's a quad rotor, dude. It's just, you can't see the rotors because they're masked by the full shape of the vehicle. Somebody's going to see that and think aliens, like that proves that I've seen a UFO, and it's some high school kid who made a science project. So right now, knowing that this technology was capable for so long, if someone came into it, like, look at this metamaterial, and it's like some strange metal, how would you know the government didn't just make it? It's part of a research project from DARPA or something.
Yeah, that's a good
Maybe
question.
Not DARPA, but
I'm basing my comments on the witnesses and the testimony that we've been given, which is that there is crash material. There are objects that, according to the people that retrieve them, demonstrably are not created by humans.
How is that? How is it?
And I'm saying, yeah, I'm willing to see that if I can get my hands on it.
It's like asking someone to imagine a color they've never seen before. How can you demonstrably or definitively state this object was or was not created by a human?
Maybe this is a good story to get into. I don't know if you know much about it, but it's about this: the Bigelow Airspace, Lockheed Martin, supposedly delivering remains of a biologic or a crashed material. So, like, say it's the crashed material, then they have that and they can reverse engineer it, or it wasn't crashed material from extraterrestrial life, and they just made it. Like, we don't know what Lockheed Martin's doing.
What if the materials they're finding are from an ancient, advanced civilization of humans?
Or a future civilization of humans.
Exactly. That's why, the argument could be this material doesn't exist in the public domain. That's all you can really say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've experienced technology that doesn't exist in the public domain. So is it China?
And that's what I've been told by, Eric Davis in a public setting said, because I specifically asked him, how do you know the material is different? And he said, it's using the same elements that are on the periodic table, but they're formed in such a way, they're structured in such a way that no one can produce that or recreate that today. And so for example, carbon can exist in graphite and a diamond form
And graphene.
Right. You
Ian
can
just made money.
right. You can also make carbon, create what they call a buckyball, right?
Yeah.
You can make carbon nanotubes. It's all the same element, and yet it creates matter in different shapes.
Right.
And he explained that the elements that this material is made of elements that are in shapes that they have never seen.
You know what's fascinating is if you were to go back 2,000 years with an iPad, they'd call it a seer stone. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't be able to explain it. And they'd tell their kids a strange man appeared he carried around a stone for which it would show pictures and he could gaze into it and he could see anywhere. They'd write a fairy tale about a witch looking into a cauldron of water or a mirror on the wall. They wouldn't be able to discern what that is.
Yeah, I think when Tim Alberino was talking about that back, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, in a lot of scripture, it refers to people seeing something.
Yeah.
They describe them as messengers of God or angels.
Watchers.
Or the watchers. Yeah. And they are, but if you saw it today, I mean, if somebody described it today, they probably would say that's an alien.
Yeah, the other thing too, I think this is in the book of Enoch. Are you familiar with that? Because Tim was talking about it.
Pretty familiar.
One of the descriptions, he mentioned the chariots of fire, and angels can be described as like
Ezekiel.
large wheels and things like that.
Yeah.
If you took some of these descriptions and went to somebody without saying anything about religion and said, a large chariot with fire bursting from the back going into the sky, they'd go, a rocket? Mm. They wouldn't think biblical or mystical.
And if you look at those stories, actually, without the religious context, like in Enoch or Elijah, they would just be an abduction story.
Sure,
because they're the only two people in the Bible who made it to heaven without dying.
Yeah,
right. And was it a chariot that took Elijah up?
Yeah.
Right?
I believe it was a chariot. I think that's what you were talking about in Ezekiel. There was during the drone craze in Jersey, somebody had filmed what they were calling an orb, but it looked like it was a wheel within a wheel, described like in Ezekiel.
That's right.
And so what is that? Is that technology that's supernatural? Like I come from a supernatural worldview with this stuff. So I'm familiar with Tim. We talk and stuff. And it's like when we look at this quote unquote alien topic, UFO topic, and then we hear people saying things like Rush, who you're familiar with, the interdimensional aspect of things, that opens up to me, this is just me speaking, it opens up an idea that maybe the UFO alien phenomenon is just a piece of a bigger puzzle, which is what I kind of touch on a lot with supernatural aspects. And when you're talking about interdimensionalism, that's where like Tim and several other people, myself, would bring in, okay, you're opening the door for supernatural when you're bringing in the idea of interdimensional, because we have ancient texts that talk about these things, and it's just it's a matter of, are you willing to accept it or not? I don't know. So,
and you know, one thing too is that people conflate dimension with universe. So when you talk about a higher dimension or a different dimension, because of movies and video games and comics, people think a different dimension means like a portal opens to a parallel universe. But parallel universe and dimension are totally different. So when you say extra dimensional beings, we don't mean that there's like another Earth called Earth B, and if you go through a portal, you're in this other. No, it means that they're entities that can perceive time as if it were space. And so, how to convey that idea to humans can't perceive of in their minds or conceive of in their minds 4-dimensional space. So we create three-dimensional representations of it. But one way to explain it verbally is just imagine if you and your buddies were hanging out and you said, hey, man, I really want a tab. Can you take a walk down the block to 1970 and grab me one? And they move through time as if it's walking down the street. That's higher dimensional beings.
So, that would be awesome.
Well, there's I don't remember which sci-fi this was. It might be Star Trek. I don't know. There's a sci-fi where once time travel is discovered, time becomes nothing. Time becomes space. So from the point humans develop time travel and on, instantly they have infinite technology, infinite space, infinite reality. And so it's like the moment the scientists were like, we have discovered time travel, the doors open up, the portals open up, and people are walking through and sharing advanced technology with each other, scientific experiments.
Right.
The moment time travel is discovered and it's universal, time becomes one moment forever. And so there's like these the whatever you want to call it, breaking the event horizon of time travel. Scientists are like, we want to see what happens to an object over 1 million years. So we're going to bring this here and put it right here. And then they walk through a door and then they see what happened. It's instant. Time is meaningless to them at that point.
So with that, the interdimensional aspects of it, and talking about what I was going with, there is this idea that people will talk about the first heaven, the second heaven, and the third heaven. And when we're talking about the interdimensional aspect, things popping through into existence, non-human intelligence, I would say and argue that maybe these things are coming from what we call the third or the second heaven. I forget what book it is, but Paul wrote in the New Testament how he was taken up to the third heaven, giving grounds for, okay, well, what's the second and first heaven? And for a very long time, theologians talk about these things. The first heaven being this plane of existence, earth. The second heaven, I would suggest, maybe is that interdimensional aspect of thing where time can be perceived differently. And even on that, in the book of Daniel, chapter 10, we see this whole thing unfold in the second heaven where Daniel is praying for understanding of a vision that he had. And there's an angel, Gabriel, who was trying to get to Daniel to give him that answer. But it says that he was delayed for 21 days.
Yeah, it was Angel Michael, right?
No, Gabriel Michael was in the story because Michael had to come and intervene on Gabriel's behalf because the spirit prince of Persia was preventing Gabriel from getting to Daniel. So we see this thing happen in the second heaven where for 21 days he's fasting and praying, seeking an answer that was trying to get to him. And it's this weird time warp within the second heaven where you see this activity happening. And so when I hear about all this stuff, I'm wondering, for me, is there a connection here with what we see in these ancient texts and what they're now coming out with in congressional hearings of interdimensional beings, non-human intelligence? That's a very loose way of describing things, non-human intelligence. That can go in very many different directions.
Yeah, even Elizondo, like one of the weirder parts to me of the one hearing you were part of is his definition of life. And he doesn't have a real definition. Like his definition of life says it's fluid, and it can change from different biologic things, and what that means. Like, what was your takeaway from that, and how do you define life?
Yeah, that was an interesting question. I have no idea how to interpret that.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon. So subscribe and come hang out.